Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Armchair Traveler Series, a series hosted by the Haines Public Library in Haines, Alaska. In this series, we have asked locals to give talks about their journeys far and near. And that's what we're here for tonight. My name is Cindy Buxton, and I've been hosting these with Matt Gilson, the Deputy Director of the Haines Public Library. This is also being done via Zoom tonight, and for those of you on Zoom, we're having some technical difficulties. So presumably you can hear us, but we cannot hear you. So if you have any questions, please type them in the chat and we'll watch over those. And those of you who have just joined, we need to make sure that you can see the actual screen that says Egypt, Israel, and Jordan. We've had problems with this in the last couple of sessions. Before I introduce tonight's speaker, I'm going to tell you about the next talks coming up. Next week on Wednesday at the same time, we're going to have Ben Altman-Moore and Liz Landis give us a talk about their journey in their canoe, kayak, kind of paddle or rowboat kayak thing, human-powered journey up the Inside Passage. And that sounds like pretty fabulous. After that, we're going to have a talk about hiking from Flower Mountain to Gustavus by Jessica Kaiser Forster, and then floating the Copper River with Nate and Elena. And then George Figdor is going to give one on visiting the prisons in Europe, trying to track his family's history during the Holocaust. And then Patty Brown's going to give one on the Himalayas called not Everest, but you can see it from there. And then the last one of this season will be Just Us Traveling, 7 months in Europe, Africa, and Asia by Annalise and Sean Silk. So we have quite a variety of adventures and journeys this year. If you know somebody who has an adventure or journey to share, you can give me their name. And if you think they're not willing, I can give them a call and try to talk them into it. It is some work, but you end up with a recording of your talk, which you can share with your family and grandkids later. And it's a good incentive to get all of your pictures organized. So it's a good thing. So call me about if you have one or if you know somebody. Okay, well, tonight our talk is by the Davis family. Holly is the one talking tonight. Some of her family is at the basketball championships, so they are not here in person. The talk is Egypt, Israel, and Jordan with the Davis family. So those of us in Haines know these folk through many different avenues. We know Holly is a children's librarian since 2000. Matt Davis has been a high school math teacher for many years and is now the choir and band teacher. And their kids we know as basketball and volleyball players, as well as we know them as great community members. So it's a great family. So here's some information you might not know the details about. Matt Davis moved to Haines in 1997 in hopes of finding a wife. Holly arrived in Haines in 1998 to see Alaska for the first time and to visit her parents, Bob and Margaret Plucker, who had moved here. Matt and Holly met at a potluck dinner at the Presbyterian Church. They've been married for 24 years and have 4 children, Mark, Luke, JC, and Meg. The family ended up taking a trip to Egypt, Israel, and Jordan in December and January, and here's their story.
Well, I am glad to be here and thank you for coming. I want to tell the story of our trip, which was basically 2 weeks. And it all started here in Haines, Alaska, when I first saw a slideshow about 20 years ago, kind of like this one. I don't remember the person's name, but it was at the Presbyterian Church talking about visiting Israel. And that was when I first thought, you can really do it? Like get on a plane and go? And we started saving money right about then, which was a good idea because it did turn out to be spendy. But I do feel like this is the most beautiful place in the world, and we were happy to come home. It was 2 weeks, one family, 3 main countries. We accidentally saw 9, but that wasn't our fault. It was the weather and the delays, and it all started on a Sunday morning, December 21st. There was a bell choir, once a year bell choir with Matt directing, and the family playing some brass at church and then rushing home to frantically pack. I had been packed for 3 weeks. My suitcase was right next to my bed, but the boys had some things they needed to throw together. And we headed out in the car. Luke jumped in the driver's seat and we dropped off our dog Nala at Leslie Evanden's house. And then we usually sing songs as we travel. So this is a little bit of us singing as we went over the mountain. And I don't know if the volume will play or not, but
Yeah, it might
it
not.
might not. It was Go Tell It on the Mountain. We were putting Meg to sleep. But then after each of the six of us picks a song and we sing, then each person has to tell a story. And we found out things we didn't know about Luke's terrible adventure over Thanksgiving, hiking, and we find out things when we ask for a story. So, and then we play games, and finally we were in Haines Junction. It was getting dark and cold. It was 30 below, and the boys wanted to play frisbee. So they were doing a little bit of frisbee tossing and pretty happy. Matt was saying, this is a really great place if you like places that are 30 below and windy. We didn't know at the time the border had closed behind us. So I thought it was safe to go on the road instead of trusting in a flight out of Haines or a ferry. But it turned out at 40 below the next morning when Matt was trying to jump our van and it wouldn't start, and he found a guy who looked like he would know what he was doing and tried to jump it again, couldn't, had to buy a bigger set of something, cords, I don't know. I was inside the hotel. They finally got it running and we got to the airport and found out Air Canada doesn't like to fly when it's below 40 below. So our flight was going to be delayed. And when they announced that, apparently I was supposed to sprint for the desk. Matt told me later I should have sprinted, but we were kind of at the back of the line. And when we got to the front, the poor lady at the front was just like, 6 people, Cairo, Egypt. So she's trying to find us something. And she said, all I can do is give you 2 nights in a hotel in Whitehorse, and then we'll fly you out. I'm like, okay. And Matt said, could we start our journey tomorrow? Like get to Vancouver or London or Paris or something? And she said, oh, yeah, sure. So that's what happened. And we ended up flying to Vancouver, had a 12-hour layover in the Vancouver International Airport, which is lovely. And then we flew right across to London and tried out the double-decker buses and going in the subway. Matt wanted to sing in the subway, but I said, let's wait until we're getting off. If they kick us out, we're already leaving. So we did sing as we left, and acoustics were great in the subway. We saw Piccadilly Circus and the Victoria Memorial and Big Ben, and woke up the next morning on Christmas in a beautiful hotel with a beautiful breakfast and headed to the airport where Mark again got out his trumpet. He likes to play everywhere. We convinced him, please don't take 4 trumpets, just one. So he brought one, and sure enough, he's playing outside at the place where people usually just walk to get a little exercise outside the hotel, and the big security guards are coming up. And I see they're going to talk to him, and I think he's an adult, he can handle it. But they said, how long are you going to be here? And do you have your passport? He's like, oh, it's with my mom and dad. Oh, okay, you're not going to be here long, right? So he wasn't there long. We ended up in Egypt like we were supposed to.
Did he have his hat out on the
No,
street?
no hat, just playing scales. But Egypt was as promised, so much ancient history. This oldest pyramid in the world, our guide Mona told us, she's the one in red, and she said she's a modern Muslim woman who does not have to wear skirts or cover her head. But I saw a lot of people dressed like me and Meg, American women who'd been told, have the scarf ready, have the long dress, because you never know. So we blended in well with all the other American women. So we we saw, like they say in the textbooks, the traditional and the modern, cars and people still making their living with farming. We were right outside the little cafe where the Egyptian boy who sold us the little treats said to Meg, can I just ask you one question? And there's 14-year-old Meg. She's, sure. He said, are those your eyes? They're so beautiful. So our guide Mona said she could get us a ride on a camel for $10 each. And we said, okay. And she did it. She got us the camels. I was so scared. But it turns out it's a little bit like riding a horse, except I don't know how to ride a horse. And Matt was taking this video showing there are actually a lot of people making their living selling camel rides. Our guide, whose name was Gouda, like the cheese, spoke very good English, but said he'd never been to school. He was just leading camel rides like his father before him. And he was very good at getting us to all be in some good places for pictures. That's Gouda right there with the green hat. And I was kind of fascinated with this whole culture that's so different from ours and yet similar because we also welcome in the tourists. And Gouda assured us it's easy to get off a camel. All you have to do is lean back as they're going down. So he right now is bravely leading the camel to the place we're all going to dismount. If you do go to Egypt, tipping is big. And so you should take plenty of tipping money. The tour guide that we went through told us that and actually had us deposit that money with him. And a week before we left, sent us the checks with it all lined up, how much the guide would get, the bus driver in each place. And that was very useful because I wanted to be generous but not broke. So, so I tipped exactly as he said to do, and I felt like I'm doing the right thing. If you could hear the sound, you would hear sounds of me saying, oh, oh, no, as I get off because it doesn't feel very sturdy. But the boys were more comfortable about getting off the camel and feeling like nothing's going to go wrong. You won't fall to the ground. It'll be fine.
Way up there.
Yeah, and it turned out people were very welcoming and very accepting. Tourism had really been down in the whole Middle East because of the situation in Gaza. And I don't follow the news very closely, but there'd been a ceasefire for 6 weeks before we arrived, and tourism was just starting to blossom again. And I can imagine for those guides, they're feeling like, oh no, not another situation, because that's how they make their living. Our tour guide, especially in Israel, where we spent the most time, we fell in love with him and invited him to come to Alaska, which he said had been a dream of his. But now I don't know how is he going to make the money because he said that it has been tough to make enough just to live, let alone to be able to take a trip. So we headed into the inside of the pyramids with the boys being brave enough to do some things they warned us might be hot, might be claustrophobic. I stayed outside where I felt it would be safer, but we did have a few things happen to us. I was watching this mother dog who had puppies that she was keeping safe at the base of the pyramids, and a woman came up to me, an old grandma, and wanted to give me something for free. But I was backing away because I'd been warned. They'll give it to you for free, and then they'll say, she didn't pay, and then you'll be stuck. So I'm like, no, 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 thank you. Shukran. But in the meantime, poor Meg had to go to the bathroom really badly, and she asked Mona to take her, and the people at the bathroom were like, sorry, closed, closed, sorry. And Mona's like, Meg, can you hold? And Meg's like, I can hold. But she was going to explode. And so when Matt came over and like, what's the deal? He said, come on, Meg. And he went over to the bathrooms. He's like, here's $1 from her, $1 from me. And they just parted like the Red Sea. So it was true. Sometimes you have to pay to use the bathroom. So we saw the Sphinx, which is just as big as you've always thought, and then watched everybody go home at the end of the day. A parade. As we go in closer, you'll see he has a cell phone and the camel's looking to see if there are any messages for him. There were a lot of folks going home at the same time. They cleared all out. And the next day we woke up and we were on our way to Israel. It was a little bit of an early morning and our paperwork wasn't perfect, but we got through. I thought we'd been able to fly Egypt to Israel because they're neighbors, but no, we had to go through Greece. And finally, this is where we're seeing our first glimpse of Tel Aviv and actually landing. And it's been my dream for so long. I felt like, is this really happening? Should I pinch myself? But it is really happening. We met Ali, our driver, who is an Arab Israeli and good friends with Boaz, our tour guide, and they wanted to emphasize that to us, that we are friends even when we are not at work. We hang out. If Ali's wife is having trouble with Ali, she calls me. That's what happens. Like, okay, that's serious. They took us to a Druze restaurant, and then we headed up to Mount Carmel, The food was so good. Matt and I both gained 5 pounds. But here on Mount Carmel, we saw the rainbow, looked down at the valley, and sang Dona Nobis Pacem. And that's when our guys, Boaz, said, "Oh, this is going to be a fun tour." So he did ask us if we were missing anything at breakfast, and we assured him no, we were not missing anything. And then he said, "Bacon?" And like, "No, I actually don't make bacon at home." He said, "Well, you'll notice it's kosher. They say there are two kinds of food, good food and kosher food." I'm like, no, it's not true. It was all delicious. We woke up looking out at the Sea of Galilee from our hotel and headed down to the water to see a boat. This old boat is from the time of Jesus, so they call it the Jesus boat, although we don't know if he actually rode on it. But two brothers who are amateur archaeologists discovered it and had quite a time getting it out of the mud without letting it disintegrate. And they built the replica here. And then we got on a boat ourselves. And Boaz said, "Sing a song." And so we all started talking, "What song? What song? This is a big moment." And we're like looking on our phones. He's like, "Just sing Amazing Grace." I'm like, okay. So we did. And this map shows we're up here where Boaz told us most of Jesus's ministry happened, just right around the Sea of Galilee. He thinks mostly on the Israel side, although when we went to Jordan, people said, "and over on the Jordan side." And then our journey would take us all the way down to the end, the Dead Sea. So Matt really wanted me to show you a map. Now I have. This is Boaz showing us the ruins and explaining that people lived so humbly, but managed to save enough for that beautiful temple that was built from them giving out of what little they had. And that's one of the temples that they're pretty sure Jesus taught in. Not in pristine condition now, but still it looks like, a synagogue, I should say. And I wasn't sure about this. I thought maybe Matt should refrain from spitting, but it just means don't shout. So he did not shout. This church was right next to those ruins, and I call it the Star Trek church because it does kind of look like those big legs, are from the future. But the good reason that it was built that way was because these ruins right underneath are the place where they think the friends brought their paralyzed friend. And since there was too big of a crowd to get in to see Jesus, they made a hole in the roof and lowered him down. And so the church above has a glass floor right here. And it was very quiet and very peaceful. There was a monk on duty. We did not sing there because it seemed like this isn't a place for singing. This is for quiet praying. Shh. But it was nice. And then we went to the Church of Beatitudes, which has 8 sides because there are 8 blessings that Jesus gave somewhere around this hill. Like, blessed are the poor, blessed are the meek, blessed are the merciful, for they shall be shown mercy. And Boaz said he was a secular Jew, but I think he was one of the most spiritual people I've ever worked with. He would read from the Old Testament or the New Testament, and then he would explain what it meant. And then he would say, "Now you go meditate on that or pray about that. I'll give you some time. I'll be waiting by the bus. See you in about 15 minutes. And so we did. I told him if the tour guide thing doesn't work out, he should consider being a preacher. So he just laughed. This is one of the places people said, "Don't go to the Golan Heights," but it turned out it wasn't dangerous or scary. This is also known as the Gates of Hell because it was considered a gateway to the underworld. And if you look over the railing, you can see down, 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 where in the old days, they used to sacrifice the virgins. And if the water ran clear, the sacrifice was accepted by Pan. And if it ran red, it was not accepted. So they are pretty much positive this is the place where Jesus asked his disciples, "Who do you say I am?" Because that is the only place that fits the description of the gates of hell. We climbed to the top of Mount Arbel, and it was not nearly as high as Riley or Rapinski, but we did enjoy getting to have a little chance to stretch our legs. There was a lot of riding in a van to get from one place to another. and I liked seeing the mountain goat. We went down to the beach where Jesus was said to have built a fire, and his disciples were fishing and they saw him. It was after his death and resurrection, and they recognized him. And the way the story goes, Peter said, "It is the Lord," put on his clothes and dove in the water to reach the beach, which makes you wonder, what was Peter wearing when he was fishing? I don't know. Grundens had not been invented yet. Yeah. If you were looking out the window of our van, you would have seen Orthodox Jews, fountains, very modern traffic, our hotel. We were so glad to get back and rest. And the next day there was more good food. And at breakfast, soldiers fully armed. And JC knew you shouldn't just like take their picture right on, but he subtly took this selfie. We went to the Jordan River to a site where they host baptisms. We don't know that this is the exact place where Jesus was baptized. The people in Jordan are positive that it happened on the Jordan side, and the Pope confirmed it. So this is just the same river. But I was baptized as a baby, so I wanted to reconfirm my baptismal vows, and Meg had never been baptized. Her three brothers went out to the Lynn Canal by the cruise ship dock in that cold water. So they were the photographers, but it's all set up. They gave us the towels and the robes, and there was a changing room, and I didn't know if she wanted to go first or me. And it was pretty cold, but we sang "As I Go Down to the River to Pray," or the water, and I didn't even feel the cold after the singing got going. This is all of us warm and dry afterwards and headed to Jerusalem, which is a beautiful city, divided, of course, and we accidentally got to see all four parts. Boaz told us as we arrived, "I'm going to give you 2 hours to wander around, but it's getting dark. So don't go to the old city." I didn't know what the old city was. "But if you do go to the old city, don't buy anything. But if you do go to the old city and buy something, don't use a credit card. Use cash." So all this time, Matt's thinking, let's go to the old city. So we wandered around and we ended up very close to it, but we didn't end up inside. We did find things that looked like castles and old cathedrals, and we did end up singing. Since it was Christmas time, we sang "Away in the Manger" in this echoey outside of a cathedral, St. George's. And the next day, Boaz took us to the old city. We'd been right there on the outside of the big wall. We hadn't even known. It's very narrow and crowded. He gave us a break after doing some of the Stations of the Cross to go about a half-mile away to the Garden Tomb, which is peaceful, and there's a little stream with a bridge. And I would like to believe this is the place where Jesus's body was laid. But there's a lot of historical evidence that it was actually the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. So this is the gift shop right outside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Boaz took us there and said, "These people are honest. He's known them for years, more than 20 years. And then later he told us they're Arab Israelis and they would vote differently than he votes, but you can trust them." And so we did. We bought things. I bought the Tree of Life necklace. The boys bought cross necklaces, which surprised me. I never knew they wanted cross necklaces. And I wasn't sure, like, do all three boys have a special sweetheart somewhere? So, no, they wanted to wear them. They've been wearing them ever since. And I told them, very masculine. They do look very, very masculine. So we headed towards the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is super ornate and shared by 6 different Christian denominations, and a Muslim family has the key. And they lock it every night and they unlock it every morning. It's a tradition that has been passed down. There's always construction, they told us. So this was a big tractor coming right out of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And afterwards, we went to see a relatively new synagogue. Boaz told us that after the first synagogue there was destroyed, someone gave a very big donation so that a new synagogue could be built. And the prime minister felt like they had enough synagogues in Israel, but perhaps a new soccer field would be good. And he used all the money for a new soccer field. So they had to get more donations, and then they finally did build the actual synagogue. We came around a corner of the old city, and suddenly we were looking down at the Western Wall. And I was just like, is that it? Like I've seen on the news? That's it. And Boaz told us you can write on a little piece of paper and stick your prayer right into a hole. It was hard to get to the front of the line, but we did it. And then our last full day, we had three main goals: Masada, Ein Gedi, and the Dead Sea. We did not climb the mountain to get to the top of Masada. We took the cable car. And at the top, you can look down and see where the Romans were camped. Because it's dry, dusty desert, things are preserved really well. And maybe many of you know the story of Masada. It was the last little band of Jewish people trying not to be eradicated after Rome had pretty much wiped out the rest of the Jewish people about 2,000 years ago in Israel. So Boaz told us the story that they could see the Romans camped there. They knew that their doom was coming and they would be killed, tortured, made slaves. And the Romans put other Jewish people in the front so that if the Jews who were hiding out on the top of this flat plateau tried to attack back, they would be killing their fellow Jews. So they felt there was no honorable way out, and suicide was not something that was an option. So they drew lots, and each man who drew the lot to go home and put his own family to death did, and then came back. And the last man who drew the lot to end the lives of those men did. They made sure to leave a huge pile of all their food so the Romans would know they were not starving, and all their water was there. It had been Herod's getaway palace, so it was lovely. And the Romans were so disheartened when they came to break through that final piece of, they built the road and they broke through, and some of the Roman soldiers just quit and went home. But now in Israel, they have a field trip that every Israeli student must see Masada before they graduate from high school. And the Israeli army has a motto, something like Masada, never again. So Boaz was an interesting person to hear the history from. If we asked him something like, what's the deal with some people say Palestine? He would say, okay, I will give you a short answer and talk for 1 hour. It's like, oh, we're learning a lot of history. We stopped at Ein Gedi, which is where David was hiding in the caves from King Saul. And when King Saul had to go to the bathroom and went to the front of the cave, David and his men were in the back. And he had the chance to kill the king. His men were urging him, David, do it now. But he said, no, I will not lay my hand on the king whom God has appointed. And Boaz had a little sermon about don't seek revenge. It's better to live like that, where even if you have an enemy, you don't do wrong to them. So we did put our feet in the water, but we were kind of saving our real swimming experience for going to the Dead Sea. And it was just as salty as they've told us. And it wasn't super warm. So we had to be brave. The mud's supposed to be really good for you. They have a place where you can wash off the salty water. You do float with no help. The boys stayed in longer than we did. It kind of stings. Um, but it was still just such a wild experience. Like we're looking across, Jordan's on the other side. And on New Year's Eve, they don't have fireworks because they've had too much experience with things exploding. But there was a big dance party in our hotel. Matt and I watched the sun go down and then we went to sleep, but the kids woke up and it was the kind where you put on headphones and it's music. You're nodding your head. I didn't even know this was a kind of party. So everyone's dancing to the same music, but just shouting and singing and laughing and not having deafening music in the air. As we were driving out, we saw some Bedouin villages. And then we headed to the border where one of the drivers had this air freshener. And I was just like, is that Saddam Hussein? And so Matt asked him, the driver didn't speak English, Saddam Hussein? And the driver's like, I was starting to question, what am I doing? But the kids wanted to know who's Saddam Hussein. I'm like, later. Later, we'll talk about it. A very nice guide in Jordan, Fadi, took us to this place where Moses looked out over the promised land that he would not get to enter, but it was interesting to hear Fadi's take on it. He felt like Moses misunderstood because the promised land is actually heaven. Why would God promise you dirt? And I'm thinking, Fadi wishes Israel wasn't full of Jewish people. And it turned out Fadi had been born in Jerusalem, and he's not able to go back now because he's not 65 yet. When he's 65, he will be allowed to return to Israel. We went to the town of Wadi Musa, which means the Valley of Moses, and it's right there at the gates of Petra. So our hotel was luxurious. We usually just stay all 6 of us in one room, and some people sleep on the floor, and our suitcase will have peanut butter and bread and oats so we can have, oatmeal for breakfast. And everything was so lovely. We went for a walk in the morning, which we probably shouldn't have done because after we walked that hour, then it turned out we were walking all day in Petra. But it was amazing to see. This shows how much it just goes on in the desert. And that 30-day tour, they never got to the end of it all. We did get a short ride on the horses just for fun. And after that short ride, everybody's supposed to get off the horses, and only the security people get horses. Fadi told us, okay, you're coming up to the Seek, that skinny part where after that you will see what was lost to the Western world for over 1,000 years was the treasury. And that's what you see on cups and magnets and postcards. And it was kind of amazing to us. How did they do that? And we went in further, hiked up. There's a bunch of different trails, but we did not get on the donkeys. People braver than us were riding donkeys up those narrow trails and sometimes screaming. We made it to the monastery. It reminded me of the hiking at the Grand Canyon, except there were people selling stuff about every 10 or 20 feet. So you can see ahead, there was another Bedouin market, kind of. And I brought some of the scarves that I bought and some little things. The women would shout out, "Women support women," and "No charge for looking," and "Make my day." I'm like, oh, I gotta go. So I would try to look without looking. But we did have to hurry at the end because at 4 o'clock at our hotel, it's chocolate hour. And they have a fountain and they have little things to dip. And the next day we woke up to see the desert. I've never been super curious about the desert. And my son Mark asked, what does this part have to do with the Bible? So we asked Fadi, and Fadi said, well, with Moses leaving Egypt and coming up on the right side of the Jordan River, it's pretty much 100% he had to go through this desert, the Wadi Rum. Like, oh, well, that has to do with it then. So they told us to get in the back of the truck, and it was really windy and cold. We're starting to wonder if this is a practical joke. They do, but no. And he told us to take off our shoes, which we did. And then the kids started playing in the sand. It was so different from what we experience here. I love our beaches, of course, but to be able to just run and the sand is soft and you're looking out at a landscape where the movie The Martian was filmed, some Indiana Jones was filmed in Petra. Mark, the former long jumper, was giving it a go. But it is beautiful and very different. So we explored a few more places in the Wadi Rum and ended up on this road back to the airport. And when Fadi told us he had a surprise, I thought, let it be a beach. Because I had been hearing about snowpocalypse, which many of you suffered through right about that time. And I knew what we were going home to, the cold and the dark. And just one beach in the sun would have been so fun. But the surprise was the ruins of another old church, which was very special. And then we said goodbye to our driver, Mohammed, who had introduced himself to us by saying, I am Mohammed, the father of Jesus. And we were like, nice to meet you. But we asked Fadi later, what? Like, what does he even mean? And he said, oh, yeah, because Mohammed's son is named Isa, which is Arabic for Jesus. That's all. Okay. Not so weird then. We flew back to Tel Aviv And we did have one night on the Mediterranean Sea. We would have had more time except for that below 40 in Whitehorse. But we did see the volleyball courts. And if I ever get to go back again, I'll schedule more time on the sandy beaches. When we headed back, it was 4 a.m., of course. And Mark got out his trumpet again and probably scared everyone again. But you can see he's got this little schmute. So it's not super loud. When he plays, it's a whisper, really. He just has to play every day. Luke headed off on one plane, going straight back to college. The 5 of us on another over Germany with mountains almost as beautiful as Alaska has. And then we flew all the way to Vancouver and Whitehorse. We got our luggage. We headed home. It was so cold and snowy, but we were happy to be back home and thankful that it was a wonderful trip. That's the end. Now, your chance to ask questions if you want. Yes.
Any safety issues that you experienced where you felt like maybe it's not as good a condition as we were supposed to be in?
I felt safe the whole time, which is unusual for me because I get scared easily. But yes.
Remember, just repeat the question back.
The question is, did you feel safe? I think part of the reason we did feel safe is because we went with a tour. Our friend Barb Blood had told us, contact Russ Goodman, faith-based expeditions. And so I had emailed him and he arranged everything, the tour guides, the bus drivers, the hotels with all that good food. And I think it might be different traveling without that. Also, Boaz did a good job of warning us about things, like the old city at night with a credit card. That was a no. And the Dead Sea, going to sting. Don't be surprised. So I think it really helped to have a tour guide. That's a good question. Other questions that people have or things you noticed that I didn't explain? Yes, Kay?
There were some pause in one of the.
Wasn't that strange? So you know the movie The Martian with Matt Damon? Well, apparently they've made it into a tourism thing now. So you can go and spend a night in the pod, just like you're in the movie The Martian.
I didn't see it. So.
I only saw it once. But yeah, you can pretend that you're on Mars. How cool is that? But you don't actually have to go to Mars to do it. Yeah.
So it was a movie set.
It was a movie set. The question was about those pods in the Wadi Rum from a movie set.
There's a lot more air there than there is on Mars.
Yes, that helps. That helps a lot.
Molly,
Yes.
what did the kids find most interesting or surprising or enjoyable?
That's an interesting question. I think they liked the times when they could play a little bit. So when we were hiking up a mountain or jumping in the sand or not really splashing in the Dead Sea, we were not supposed to splash, no splashing, because if it gets in your eyes, you can go blind. Boaz told us. But they liked that. And I think they liked the singing too. Like as we were going through the Stations of the Cross in the old city in Jerusalem, we sang at some of those different places. And it's getting more and more rare for all 6 of us to be together. So it's really special when we get to do that. Other questions?
There's some on the chat.
Not yet. I put it out there if anybody on chat. But
Did you do all 12 stations or did you?
Mhm.
Because, yeah,
Think
we
so.
did that like 3 times because we'll camp at station 2. So that's where we had our room for 3 days. So it was
Okay.
interesting. So
Yeah, and some of them would be like a little chapel that would be really special and quiet, and others were kind of on a busy street. And Boaz said sometimes the American tourists complain, like trying to have a spiritual experience, and people are just hustling by and having lunch over there, and it's loud. And he told them, well, what do you think it was like when Jesus was carrying his cross through this place? Oh, it's probably busy, and there were probably people having lunch over there. And yeah, so yeah, he was very honest. Other questions?
What will stay in your mind the most from the trip?
What will stay in my mind the most now when I see names or like if I'm reading a Bible story and it says the Sea of Galilee, I feel like, yeah, I know what part of that looks like. And it brings it to life. I had been hoping and praying we would be safe and have transformation. And I think both happened. Um, Also really special that Meg got baptized there because our trip was supposed to happen 5 years ago. And then the pandemic came and we postponed it. And I'm glad it finally worked out. Yeah. Other questions? Okay.
You said you went with a faith-based tour,
Mm-hmm.
and what faith was that? And does that mean that everything was based around wanting to hit certain spots, religious spots?
Yeah. So Russ Goodman is a Christian, and I assumed he would set us up with Christian guides, but he said, no, he would set us up with the best guides. And so that was true. Mona was Muslim, but she had a lot of knowledge. And Fadi told us Jesus is mentioned more often in the Quran than Muhammad is mentioned in the Quran. And I didn't know that. So we were learning as we were going. The tags they sent us for our luggage just said faith-based, so there was nothing to like identify our family as Christian. And um, I think in a way it meant more to have a secular Jew telling the story of his country as we were going around than it would have been to have an American Christian pastor. We did see other groups, like 40 people from Chicago led by their pastor, which would also be really special. And originally I thought it would be a bigger group. I had reached out to family, but nobody wanted to come with us. So that's okay. We had a fun time anyway. And part of it is expensive. And and I think some people do feel like, how do you know it's going to be safe? 6 weeks of ceasefire from the Gaza situation, and now there's another situation, you don't really know. Our taxi driver taking us to the airport in Tel Aviv said, oh yeah, that's the building that got bombed. And when that siren goes off, we're all supposed to pull over on the freeway and just shelter behind our car for 10 minutes. I'm like, wow, okay. But he said, don't worry, it doesn't happen very often. Okay, where we live, it doesn't happen.
Buses too often.
So, yeah. Other questions?
More questions? So, so that the Zoom people can see me as well.
Yes.
That was awesome.
Thank you.
That was the subject material and your presentation. I'm feeling jealous, maybe some of the rest of you are, that I should be going to the story times. And I have realized in recent years that I have more fun in my 60s when I pretend that I'm a 6-year-old and I'm doing things with 6-year-olds. So maybe you'll see me in the next couple of weeks.
Super
Maybe some of you will come to
joy.
story time as well. That was fabulous. Thank you.
And I did bring a few souvenirs that are over there if people want to come look, or books you want to see, or questions you want to ask me when not everybody's listening. I can stand over there and that could work out.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
The Muslims anchor